November 6th, 2019. I am aware we have a non-public at 6:05 this evening. Do we want to delay that at all, or are we prepared to go in now?
I think we can go in. Our attorney's there if you have any questions for him before we start.
Okay,
We can do that.
so why don't we do that?
Okay.
Okay, so I'll entertain a motion to go into non-public under RSA 91A:3(2), compensation and/or reputation, A and C.
I make a motion that the board by roll call go into non-public session pursuant to RSA 91A:3(2)(c) to discuss a matter which, if discussed in public, would likely affect adversely the reputation of a person other than a member of the body or agency itself.
Second.
Any discussion on that? Seeing none, all in favor?
Roll
Roll
call.
call.
Oh, roll call vote, right, thank you.
Also that.
So we'll start with
Brooke Arthur, aye.
Carol Roy, aye.
Amy Kellner, aye.
Rob Mann, aye.
Kelly, aye.
All right, we will be back.
We're going to go down to the art room.
Okay.
More room.
Non-public agenda adjustments, please.
We won't need the second non-public, Mr. Chair.
We will not need it. Okay, we'll just take that off. Tammy, you
Yeah, I
have
have
an
the
agenda
agenda adjustment. We would like to discuss reporting on the energy project, an update to the board.
The summary?
A summary statement, that's
Budcom?
right. Right.
All
And I
right,
was
we're-
proposing we would do it
Yeah.
around the barn and facilities discussion.
Okay, so
Somehow,
how
I don't
about
know, do you
right
think
after
before
it?
or after?
I think let's do it right after the
Okay, that's fine. That's
facilities
what I assumed.
remediation.
Okay.
Yep.
After, okay,
Yeah.
so I'll put it here.
Makes sense to me.
And then the only
Each
other
step.
thing, Mr. Chair, I don't know if there's anything you want to look to eliminate simply because of the length
Yeah,
of the non-public.
we had an extended non-public, so am seeking to table the item for the grants. And we would also want to use the time to receive additional input from the community.
Agree. Will tabling affect
Nope.
deadlines of any sort?
Yeah, so any delay isn't, yeah, okay.
Well, I'd like to
It's a
move to
good
table.
point.
Is that something you'd like to do, have a motion to table?
I think we should.
Since it's a
Because
deliberation
then
item?
we'll motion to take it off the table when we're ready to reopen it and talk and possibly take an action, right? So
Mhm.
tonight, it's an opportunity to receive input,
Yep.
but we're not going to do any
Okay.
business
Right.
relating to it.
Got it.
Does that sound
And this
fair?
will give the people, because we received input from people that were unable to come tonight.
That's right.
So this will allow them to either email board members, administration, because, since this afternoon, I've received both sides of the issue.
And-
Also,
So
the-
since it's a deliberation item, I think we should have a motion on the floor before we discuss it, if you don't mind. So I'd like to move to table.
The agenda also wasn't posted by accident until this morning, so
No, just to
Okay.
clarify on that, the agenda was posted last Thursday.
Uh-huh.
And at some point over a period of time, we lost internet capabilities and things, so it deactivated it, so if you tried to click on it on the web,
Okay,
you couldn't
it
have done that.
Okay.
But the agenda itself is posted at the SAU, this building in Hughes, which is,
Physical. Okay,
which is the
got it.
legal requirement. But that's the other reason, because Brooke made me aware of that this morning, and Jackie went in, and we know it was working on Friday, but somewhere over the weekend, whether it's a power failure or internet, so we re-uploaded it today.
Gotcha.
Yep.
So I'd like to move to table deliberation item concerning the facility security grant awarded to Hughes as it appears on our today's agenda.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Any discussion relating to that?
And this is just our deliberation that you're asking to table and any vote or action that we're
Exactly.
taking, but we're still
Tonight.
leaving tonight, but leaving it open for public input.
Absolutely.
Just to
Tonight.
clarify for everybody.
Yeah.
Yeah, you guys are all like, what? So yes, it's, just wanted, yeah,
Yeah.
thank you.
So we'll move it to new business for December at the very earliest to take any action. Okay, so that gives us a little bit more time.
For
to
public
think-
input
yeah,
and
yeah,
information.
yeah.
Yes, thank you.
Any other discussion? Seeing none, all in favor? Okay, 500. Any other adjustments?
Nope.
Okay, let's
I-
move to approval of the minutes.
Okay, so I'm motion to approve the minutes with, for Hollis School Board, October 2nd, 2019, with the following amendments. Page 5, line 5, correct the spelling of water. Page 5, line 8, replace "are" with "is." Page 5, line 30, insert "meeting" after "following." Motion to accept as amended.
Second.
Any further discussion or any further amendments? Seeing none, all in favor? 500. Any other meeting minutes to deal with? No? Okay. Moving to nominations, resignations, and correspondence.
We have done tonight.
I do have one correspondent that was sent to the board, and I have a request to read it into the record.
I don't think we're intended to take emails to be read into the record. And I think it pertains to the item that we are postponing, So there'll
Okay.
be an opportunity to attend the next
So
meeting.
perhaps we also table that until next time.
Yeah, I can make
Okay.
that person aware, and they're most welcome to come and speak to it. If we start to read emails into the record, we could get hundreds and hundreds of emails. And
Right.
that's why we set up
Understood.
public input.
Got it, okay. Very well. All right, we'll move right into the principal report.
Just a couple of brief things. Hughes is still looking for a custodial position, if there's anybody out there. We introduced what's called a sensory hallway at Hughes. We're very excited about that. We now have one at Hughes, one at RMMS, and it's amazing. I was in the building the other day at RMMS, and kids just naturally do it. It's something to do, and I never really understood it, but watching the kids go down and match their hands up along the wall, get to the wiggle line, and then it's like I would call it hopscotch. They probably don't anymore. But it was just an amazing thing to see. And again, it really allows some children to burn off that excess energy, and it's a very positive step for them. So I just wanted to let you know that's in progress. Candy gave out 75 students awards for wings. And those are for academic, social, emotional, all different things. It was very nice ceremony. And the students in Mrs. Gardner's class hosted the all-school town meeting where they had a special guest. Mr. Kane came back because it was monster math. And he just did a wonderful job, and it was great to see Dennis. And I can tell you that he is enjoying his retirement immensely, but we were able to convince him to sign up as a substitute.
No.
Yes. Yes. So that's it for the principal's report.
Okay, thank you. Any questions relating to the principal report?
Are we able to specially request said substitute for our class?
Well, I do know it's going to have to work around all his other plans. He never realized he could be this busy, you know.
In
He thought it was,
retirement.
yes, he thought it was difficult to, come to school every day, and now he doesn't know how he ever did school with all his retirement activities. He's doing well.
I guess the one question I have is related to enrollment,
Okay.
and it looks like we're a net,
Net zero.
what is our net
Net zero,
here?
we're the same.
A net 2?
+3 and -3, and we're right.
If you include the
Yeah.
pre-K though.
What's your feeling on where we're at, and we're keeping an eye on grade 1?
Yeah, we're good right now. We're going to have discussions with BudCom, just looking at some of the numbers, because we're right on that turning point.
Right.
We don't necessarily want to add a teacher if we don't have to. We may go into it looking at the contingency fund like we've done in the past as an alternative. But at the same time, we're seeing our special ed numbers grow, so that's also a concern. So it's trying to balance everything. But I think right now, in the month of November, we're okay.
Okay. All right, any other questions relating to the principal's report? All right, I think we're making up a little time here, luckily. All right, so we're going to move into public input. So just want to kind of lay some ground rules here for it, since it looks like we have some public input this month, which is always nice. The board holds its meeting in public. All those from the community are invited to stay and listen to the board's deliberation and actions. Public input is permitted during the public input portion of our agenda and when the chair opens the floor for public comment. At that time, the public is most welcome to and encouraged to provide it. Public input is for the board to gather and consider a sense of the public in making its decisions related to our posted agenda items as per policy B, that is BA. When the chair opens the public input portion of our meeting, please state your name and address for the record. Address your agenda-related remarks to the chair only. Whenever possible, be specific to the actions you wish the board to take and why. And statements are generally limited to about 3 minutes, give or take. So with that, we'll open the mic. Do we have a mic?
This one?
We're gonna use yours.
Sure
yeah.
thing.
Okay.
Put it on the podium.
Hello.
Hi.
Tiffany Hollis, New Hampshire. I actually just sent an email also to the board and didn't hit send until like a few seconds ago, so you'll also get a backup on this. This is in regards to the grant that was awarded, the school was awarded from the NRA. And I want to ask the board to refuse the money. And my reasoning is this. It has nothing to do with my views of the NRA. It has to do with the fact that the NRA is a politically charged, probably one of the most divisively charged lobbyist groups out there. And they are lobbying for a certain cause. And that cause is against any gun control regulation. That is absolutely what that group is. It's a lobbying group. If we accept their money, we are supporting the NRA, and we are supporting a stand that is against any gun control laws. So I just think that a school cannot take money from a politically, especially a powerhouse like the NRA group, just like I would not support if you were to apply. I don't even know how our district thought it okay to apply for money from the NRA. I would not be in support of applying for money from Planned Parenthood either. It has nothing to do with my views. We cannot, as a school, take that kind of politically charged money. Now, I am really being brave coming up here in front of the whole town and saying this, because you know what I probably might be labeled as? Someone that doesn't care about the safety of our kids. And there's already debates out there. And those debates are like, why wouldn't you? Why? What's wrong? Money is money. No, free money is not free money in this case. Free money comes from us then supporting the views of the NRA, a lobbying group. And this is what I want to say about the safety of our school. I want to say that the safety of our school is absolutely number one. And if we have done an audit of our schools and we have found that there are insecurities and vulnerabilities in our safety, then I want it on the budget, and I want the board to put it on the budget. I don't know what this money is for, but I'm saying if there's vulnerabilities, we need to put it on the budget and put it towards the town. And the town needs to make a vote whether they're going to vote for things to keep our kids safe, because I'll definitely be there to vote. But that $20,000 should not come from the NRA. Thank you.
Okay.
Hi, my name is Mo Masterson, also from Hollis. I'm here to speak about the same subject. I oppose accepting the money from the NRA. The NRA represents the gun lobby. The gun lobby's sole purpose, sole drive, is to put more guns on the street. That makes us less safe. You could put a moat with a bridge around Hughes, and still it's not going to protect you from bullets. I worked at the Washington Navy Yard when it had a shooting. That shooting was in the shadow of the nation's capital, on a military base, in a facility with armed guards. That wasn't enough security to prevent the deaths of 13 people. I don't think the NRA has our students' safety or well-being in mind. And I think that, like Tiffany said, if there is a safety problem, we need to address that through the budget process and let the taxpayers put their money where their money where their mouth is and to pay for it. It's absolutely legitimate. Safety is a concern. We can pay for it. We can pay for it that way, but we do not need to accept money from the gun lobby. And I suggest that the board rejects it and sends that check right back. Thank you.
Anyone else? Okay.
Actually, I have one more on a separate.
Oh, on a separate item? Okay, sure.
This one's a little less. Whew. This has to do with, it's come to my attention in about the past month. It's a personal anecdotal story, so I'm gonna try to respect those that are involved. But I became aware of a member of our community who was, in their eyes, singled out and discriminated against in terms of I'm talking about I think it's on for tonight, the policy on residency, improving your residency. And so what I want to say about that is that when you marginalize, when you single out a group that is marginalized or a minority, and that minority is a minority due on race, there's no way of getting around that word. And we can trickle around it. And I think when you talk about education and equity, it's very hard for me to say that word right now. And I just know that what I stand for in terms of education and equity, we have to be implementing our policies and our practices in a way where the burden of proof and the burden of whatever it is not on the marginalized and minority. If there's a policy that makes it harder for us to prove residency of renters, well then, I don't know, work with the policy, or we have to work harder at it. But we do not have to put a minority group, and if you look at the stats on renters, they're often linked with other marginalized and minority groups. That makes them feel segregated. It doesn't create a unity in communities. So I want us to implement policies in a sensitive way. Just because we don't have a very large population of minorities in our town, oh my gosh, I'm shaking. We don't have the luxury and right to not pay attention. Because if we have a policy that makes anyone feel marginalized and not included, then we're not doing it the best we can. Thanks.
All right, very good. We'll go ahead and move on to our discussion portion of our meeting, SAU barn facilities and remediation update.
In your board packet, you have a budget proposal for Moran Contracting Services. Moran is the estimators that worked with David Ely from Windy Hill Associates. He's our architect doing the barn. They provided an in-depth cost estimate, so we'd be working off what I would say is close to a concrete number as you could get for this project. The total dollar amount for the barn and SAU renovations is $1,345,694. I'm not going to go through all the different HVAC, plumbing, and that, because I think that's just in your packet, and I know you've read those. I do just want to go over the cost and how they arrived at that. The general conditions of working with the site are $106,930. The demolition that would need to take place is $24,280. That demolition work is stripping of much of the material of the barn that is not reusable, some of the floors, some of the siding. It will require them to come in with excavators, actually raise the barn up, put it on platforms while they build the foundation around it, and eventually lower it back down. That's also included in the site work of $84,000. The concrete for that foundations and the piers and things that would be required are $44,290. The carpentry work is the most extensive work, as you could imagine, on an old barn of $303,192. To address the thermal and moisture issues, if you were to go to the back side of the barn, on that parking lot area, you will notice that probably about a half a foot to a foot of all the boards are just like literally being eaten away. And that's the constant moisture coming out of the soil and the grass over there.
And dripping, right, from in the
Correct.
spring with the snowpack.
Yep. So all of that would be corrected. Doors and windows would be totally upgraded to $75,848. New wall board at $29,136. flooring and painting accounting for about another $77,000. And then the other two major expenses are your HVAC, because there's no heating system there, and your electrical work, and those come to a total of about $270,000. They have put in a contingency into that $1,345,000 of $64,081. That will give you a complete renovation of the barn to be able to use as commercial space. It will be tied into the existing SAU office. There'll be what I'll call minor repairs to the existing SAU office, and it will allow us the expansion of that to meet the I'll call it the business housing needs of the SAU staff. So that is a proposal that we're going to discuss later during deliberations, because we'd like to take it to the Budget Committee this month, but the Budget Committee has kind of asked, not so much that the board is committed to that dollar amount of that, but just that the concept is that we would like to move forward with these projects, because then it becomes a Budget Committee issue because it has dollars attached to it. Okay?
Right. Does it necessarily obligate the board to a particular option? Because I know we talked about in September and October the 3 or 4 options that the committee was looking at.
Right. This option has been, out of those 5 that we gave you, is the most cost-effective option to get the best bang for your dollar. We had talked about everything from ripping it down and starting from square one. And David and his people went through with bond experts, and this really is the most cost-effective. The other thing the board will have to consider is we may decide to break these out into 2 different articles and let each stand on its own merits, one for the SAU, and the other, which we'll talk about in a minute, is more, what I'll say, building-related items, which to me are closer to kids. So again, but I think it's a very solid proposal. I think it's, when we go to the voters, we've kind of got what I'll say, a real concrete number to work with, and I don't see us, and Tammy's in a lot of these discussions, necessarily seeing that go over. One of the things that we do worry about is just how much of these 2 projects, if they were both passed by the voters, could we get done in one summer?
That was my next question to you, Andy, is that the time, I've really, even being in on the meetings, it's not clear to me, because we've talked about multiple things with respect to the SAU offices, is the idea that this would be bonded in March and the entire construction project would be done completely by opening of school?
I don't know if we'd be done by opening a school, but we don't have the same, what I'll say, concerns necessarily, because we would do the existing SAU offices and do those upgrades and get those done. And we would do what I would call the work that would make me cautious, which would be the excavation and those type of things, because we do have the students' playground right next to us, and really work so that by the time we get to the school year, we would be focusing on what I would call internal work, things of that nature, so it's a very safe environment for our kids.
But the idea is it would be done all in 2020?
For
Not
the
multi-phase?
No, the bond is not a multi-phase project.
And Andy, I know that a couple of the options, we were questioning whether or not an elevator would be in there. I don't see that, so is that off the table at this moment, adding the elevator to the barn?
Correct. David has gone through, and because of the costs associated with it, didn't hit that, what I'll call cap, that would require that. So at this time, it's not in there. I know it's an item that the Budget Committee had asked about, just why not do it? So I'm not saying it won't come back into it. I'm just saying from David's point of view, the cost estimate is without one.
Which of the high-level descriptions, does this most align with?
The second one.
Second one.
The
Oh, does it
second
say
one.
that somewhere? Am I missing it?
No, I just happen to know that.
It's the second one, and it's slightly higher than we thought.
Okay.
But it is the second one, which is.
I'd just like to, ask the committee to consider, the offices in the farmhouse itself, and make sure that, we feel we're addressing everything that we may need, not only like next year, but several years down the line. This is going to be our opportunity, because once this gets in place, the space we get is the space you're going to have for a long time. So let's make sure we really feel like we're bringing what we think we need here. And I'm less concerned about making a pretty number. I want to bring the number we think, what we need to keep that property relevant to what we're, to our operations, right? It becomes a
Well,
problem.
not only to our operations, but also we own, so the Hollis School District owns that property, and it is entirely possible. The Hollis School District owns the Foreland Lane property that's currently housing the SAU. So one can envision a scenario where we get annexed by Nashua, and we don't need this SAU office anymore, and the town, the district would own it, and we could sell it. You can't sell a heap of matchsticks with a rotting barn, right? It becomes an asset, I mean, it is an asset to the school district, literally, and we want to maintain and improve it, just as a real estate, is all I'm trying to say.
So Andy, on that vein of what Rob is saying about things we need, is there anything that you feel is missing from this proposal that you would like to see maybe from one of the higher priced proposals that existed?
I think if we went with, I'll use the higher price of adding that second floor over the wing, so both floors be, I think would be many, many years where that space would be not utilized, you know, from a personnel standpoint. So I would really caution overbuilding because I think, you know, we are requesting one new position in the SAU this year for a facilities director. But I think with that position, we're pretty much staffed like most other SAUs, and I don't necessarily see us adding positions. They may arise over time, but I'm not sure that we wouldn't have room for them because this will allow employees to have what I'll say ample space, and the other piece is the basement of the barn becomes a massive storage area that we've never had. So I think that in itself frees up so much space.
No longer over our heads either.
Right.
Absolutely.
Right.
Looming.
So with that added position, you're confident that our plans and floor plans of this particular project is going to be more than adequate for what we need?
Yeah, pretty much we get people out of sharing offices and, you know, sharing 400 square feet between two people into what I would say are more appropriate commercial spaces. I will let you know that the Budget Committee did ask, you know, moving forward, were we planning to reach out and talk to our other districts, the co-op in Brookline, about a long-term lease? Because if Hollис is going to incur the debt, they don't necessarily want the SAU deciding in a year from now to move someplace else. So we have been in discussions with our attorney to look at that. I've had a discussion with the Brookline board, and they support it, just wanting to know what the rent escalation would be. Once we bring the bond online, if we pass this, we would use the present square footage amount, calculate the bond's new square footage, and that would become the rent. And then what I would recommend to this board is we put annual, every 3-year, you know, evaluations in to compare how we are commercially versus
So
other commercial spaces.
I'm wondering if we need to have some sort of policy related to facilities that stipulates some sort of a period of time at which we evaluate those things. The other thing I was thinking of, and I totally agree with you, I don't think we're looking to up the square footage amount, but if we're adding square footage, we have to think about maintenance costs to keep, you know, we don't want to undersell maintenance on this beautiful new renovated barn, right? So, and I would be interested, and I'll leave the other board members to chime in on their own, but if there's something that our experts that are on this project could possibly give us some sort of insight if they feel that square footage amount would be adequate to maintain such a place. And this, you know, I mean, adding the barn as real square footage is a pretty sizable added maintenance piece, right? So we kind of set that square footage for the building, right? And now we're kind of hoping that that is going to be good for the rest of it.
No, I think both, Brookline definitely will entertain that, and probably most likely if it's continues to be the bargain that it is now, probably support it. And we'll be having a discussion at the co-op level next week just around that same concept.
So the signee would be the governing board on this lease
Um,
in each district?
Well, technically, we would do it at a governing board, but at the same time, we've always found it easier to have, I'll say, in-depth discussions at the smaller boards, so that by the time we get to the SAU board, we've had a lot of this, back and forth questions answered, and those can be productive meetings, because they only meet 4 times a year, so it's just wanting to be as productive as possible. And that's why we're already introducing the topic, so it won't be a surprise if in February we're looking at that.
Do you feel the lease, entering into a lease agreement is solely within the board's purview, or do you think that it could wind up as being a warrant article to
No,
get permission from the communities?
I think, similar to the transportation piece, it would be a commitment by the SAU board to enter into that lease.
All right. Any other questions?
I just want to say that this renovation and remediation is long overdue.
Oh, heavens, yes, like 20 years.
How many times have you brought an architect in to study this as a
We've done
pilot?
this
This is
probably
the third, is
time.
it fourth
At least the
iteration?
4th time, at least.
Moving on to the,
8 steps,
Yeah,
are we
we
done
have-
with this?
yeah,
or
we're calling it facilities remediation.
Yes,
So I just
sorry,
want to
go
go
ahead.
through the,
Because we're going to deliberate on it, on
Right.
deliberations.
Got it.
in your board packet, you have FY21 bond warrant planning. Just to explain it again, left-hand column is the project, then the school. You have your estimated costs. We've narrowed it down to 2 priority areas. We had some other items that have moved on. And then we categorized it for the community. Is it H-step related, which means was it energy related or something to do with that type of upgrade, or was it a capital improvement project? Then we also put it out there, is it, to further define those, is it safety, security, energy savings, is it end of life, is it past end of life? Does it relate to health issues? Are there any code compliance issues? Does it improve the learning environment? So we try to categorize it by many different ways so people, when they look at some of these numbers, could understand why they're before them. I'm not going to run through all of them because the list is in your packet. I do want to just highlight, first of all, the total is $2,476,172. Couple significant items that we're going to face even if H-step fails, okay? Air Handler 3, which is one of the large roof units up at Hughes, is basically at its end of life. That piece of machinery is a $230,000 item. That is responsible for changing the air within the building, as well as assisting with some of the heating components to that. At the primary school, we would be finishing the last 19 classrooms for air source heat pumps, which would be $297,100. At Hughes, we would replace all the heat unit ventilators, which are the units that regulate cool air coming in from outside, along with our Munters unit, and that's $223,000 to replace those units. One big item that we like to do when we look at this through a multitude of lenses is we're sitting in a building that's over 50 years old and it doesn't have a sprinkler system. And we think that's a safety issue that should be addressed. To put a sprinkler system in this building would be $693,100 because it requires us, a huge chunk of this is to bury the water tank out in the garden area, because that water needs to be separate, unique for the sprinkler system in case of an emergency. So it's dedicated to that.
And that has its probably own pumping system
Yes.
and everything.
Yes.
It's
Yeah.
probably power backed up and all this
Yes.
particular.
Yeah, and that will allow us, obviously to be much better fire rated, but most importantly, give us the ultimate, safety for our children that are in the building. God forbid an event should happen.
Do we anticipate an insurance break on that? Great.
Insurance would look at it favorably, but when you're looking at such a massive entity, It'll probably just mitigate next year's increase.
I see.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I don't want to give this false notion.
Yep.
We're consolidating boilers here, as well as replacing our underground oil tank at HPS with propane. We would love to get rid of our underground oil tanks. They are environmentally a concern. Our tank is fine, there are no issues with it, but it is due in the next 5 years to be replaced. So this is an opportune time, and to get the whole facility on propane, along with the town, gives us a larger buying power, because we do price propane with the town. There are many other items. I mean, there is another $80,000 worth of insulation up at Hughes. Many of your eaves, when the school was built, just never had any insulation put in. We have a steel beam that runs from the ground right to the ceiling. We did a temperature check on that beam, and it was 7 degrees
So
last year.
after the foaming of the gap, you heard about this 1,100 running feet of gap,
Yeah.
4 inches wide along all 1,100
Open to
feet.
the outside.
Linear feet, not open to the blue sky, but exposed to the air.
Yeah.
So the building was under negative pressure. When you opened the front doors, it sucked in all this air through, over these steel beams from the outside into the building untouched. So after we'd done all that foaming last summer and it was all set, there was a pipe issue, not quite bursting, but a frozen pipe issue in the 4th grade wing. And our consultant, Dick Henry, and Ed Hinkle at the building were hand on their hip wondering, what the heck, how did that happen? We just spent all these millions of dollars on insulating the building, and they found another 120 square feet hidden in a nook where all the renovations come together in a kind of a maze-ish sort of thing. And they used a temperature gun on it. It was 7 degrees Fahrenheit. This beam that Andy's referencing, but the work had already been done, et cetera, so it's a critical component.
And the other major item, again, at HPS is interior and exterior doors. We have $265,000 in. We'd be renovating the main entrance in terms of new doors. We'll be replacing and upgrading many classroom doors. There are some doors, if we do the sprinkler system, that we don't have as great a concern because their fire rating with the sprinkler system changes from a code point of view. So again, that's how we get to the $2,476,172. I do want to let you know that we did ask the architect to price out what a new elementary school of the same size would cost us. And to replace Hughes would be over $17 million, HPS is over $17 million. To replace Hughes is over $24 million to build new facilities.
And that assumes that you can keep the kids here while you build that somewhere,
Right.
right?
Yeah. So we believe, just like we can see from the renovation we did a couple years ago in this room, we can significantly extend life expectancy of these buildings. They were built very well. They just weren't built to new insulation standards and things of that nature. So we'll be moving this forward to BudCom to have a discussion there. We have it coming back to us during the deliberative session, during tonight's deliberation, just to get the board's input from a formal point of view.
Andy, can I just ask a quick question on the materials provided? We have the kitchen and septic grease trap upgrade at HPS and the Drury Lane catch basin HPS Hughes. Both of those are highlighted in yellow, nothing in a cost estimate. Is it because we haven't done the cost estimate yet, or where we stand on that one?
We are looking at, if you think of HPS and then you look at the potential enrollment projections that could see us bursting at the seam within 10 years, the only way we could expand would be to go in that direction. So the architects, via discussion, have said that we really should delay the kitchen because it may be involved in the cafeteria, gym area. We do everything in that little tiny room.
Multi-use room.
Right. And they just they don't want to limit us, because once you spend this money on the kitchen, then you've kind of locked yourself into very limited expansion.
Gotcha. Thanks for clarifying.
Yeah, good idea.
Any other questions on the two updates?
So are those estimates still pending? They're still in yellow. So.
Yes, we do have an update quote on the kitchen, which it's going to be 116,000, but we're not suggesting moving forward to that. That'll be a priority area
Okay.
3, and we'll wait that. And then we'll also look at the grease trap as a delayed, because we'll need to do the grease trap when we do the septic.
And
And
the Drury Lane catch
Yeah,
basin?
the catch basin.
The catch basin,
Priced out.
we are waiting on a number. That's something that we will be doing, whether it's in this project or a separate project. It is basically, if you come out like you're taking the bus to go up to Hughes, the catch basin is right on the
Yeah.
left there, and that needs replacement.
So that could significantly impact the bottom line number.
Yeah, I don't think that, when I look at the numbers that we're talking about, I don't think it's gonna drastically change it, and I think we're still, as a committee, working our way to a final number.
Okay, all right. The other thing I'm thinking about, so when we put this together with our barn project and offices, we get to a place about 3.8 million
Right.
for a bond. So we're still gonna have conversations about, do we put it together, do we split it? The other question I have, and would like to have Budget Committee chime in on, is what, in terms of possibly refinancing the H-step Phase 1 dollars into a
Yep.
whole bond. So we'd just like to hear where they stand on that. So
Right.
I'd be interested in that, if
Can
the
a
representatives could
lease purchase
make a note of that.
converted to a bond? Oh, awesome.
Yeah,
I don't
it's
think
like
I
just
knew.
refining your lease
Yeah.
purchase, and the financials might be favorable to do it. I think we owe it to the community. If we can save them money on payments, we need to do the investigation and just determine if it makes sense to do it, because there's costs associated to converting the paper. But we're already doing the bond, so we're already spending the money to do the bond paper for this. So it's kind of like a good idea to make sure we're, from a diligence standpoint, to make sure that we're thinking about the Phase 1 stuff that we did. All right, anything else related to this?
No.
Any other questions? All right, seeing none, why don't we get into our adjusted item?
Is this the item you wanted to
Yeah.
pass around?
So this is the summary
Sorry.
of things that the committee is going and providing, well, I'll just give it to you. I have the electronic version.
We can share.
I felt strongly that if this information is going before the Budget Committee, we should have had a chance as a board to see it, because it is our numbers. So we wanted to make sure that everyone sees what we're doing, and maybe you can talk through.
Sure, happy to.
Summarize.
Happy to. So, just to remind folks, and you'll see that in the title bar, this project began in 2016 with a study, $100,000 taxpayer-funded study, that was founded in hiring highly recommended consultants who are energy efficiency consultants, who brought in many experts in many different fields, from building sciences to roofing to the whole range and gamut. And we created a warrant article for 2017 that requested $2.8 million in a lease purchase, which is similar to a bond, it's just a different kind of vehicle, to carry out the project. The foundation of that estimate, or that ask, was a lot of high-tech modeling. So take data from bills, data from measuring temperatures, running square feet, cubic feet, BTUs, all of it, and put through multiple iterations of a modeling system to try to determine what costs would be and what savings would be. So the project was completed over 2 years, and we've had 2 winters with the solar panels, 1 year with the wrap around the building here, et cetera. We're starting to gain some data on the actuals, the actual performance of the pieces that we put into place. And we know that there were pieces that we couldn't get to because of the unknowns and the unexpecteds that emerged. So this document, the Budget Committee, of course, has been asking, can you give us a thumbnail, in a nutshell, summary of what the outcome of this thing is. And that's what this piece of paper attempts to show. So the first bar there is year 1, 2017-18. Those are the three major components that we constructed. So we put in the solar for both buildings. At Hughes, we replaced the literally rotting heating system that was oil boilers there behind Candy's office with a propane boiler and new tank. And then this building had a massive electrical renovation. So for example, just as a reminder, teachers in this building were asking the custodians to come help them pick which of the handful of outlets in their classrooms they can use for which device at which time, so we don't blow circuits, et cetera, because the circuits were from 1952, updated in 1978, very old and very few. Furthermore, when we added the solar, we didn't have the power infrastructure to handle all that juice. And furthermore, back to your question about the kitchen, Carol, we knew eventually, because of the septic issue, that the kitchen was going to have a big renovation in the not too distant future, and that was going to call on a great deal more power. So it was decided through a lot of discussion and care that that the electric renovation in this building would be very substantial in order to handle all of that while the walls were open and the wires were being pulled. We brought in a new power supply from Eversource, et cetera. So the second year, we did the building wrap, which you know about, I hope, the air source heat pumps in this building. We had originally intended not to do 6 rooms. That was always in the plan. There were 13 rooms that we fully planned to do, but contingencies caused us to not be able to do those 13 rooms. They tend to be in the second and third grade wing. And but the ones that we did do are throughout the building and are performing very well. And then that gap that I mentioned before got foamed. That was a very substantial discovery as to why that building was performing so poorly. So the next block you see there is electric heat and totals. The first column's annual costs. So our consultants took all the bills, physical paper bills, the documents, and did a 10-year average annual cost for electric and heat. Okay, so those are not projections or forecasts, that's just math. 10 years, high years, low years, and between years averaged out. The next column, FY19 actual, again, these are calculated directly from billing, not from models or projections. And what you see at the end there is savings. How much did we not spend based on that 10-year average?
Mm-hmm. So just for folks in the room that don't have the copy, I apologize.
I'm not saying the numbers, I'm sorry.
So that 10-year average runs for electric and heat about $240,000 a year for both buildings. That's to keep the lights on, everyone warm and happy. Our actuals last year under our new renovations and updates ran about $182,000. So we have a rough savings of $58,000 because, as we said, the other one was built on an average, 10-year average. So there's a little room latitude there. So right now our performance in savings on our realized project as it is $58,637.
Right. So again, what Rob is pointing out is that if we'd taken our FY19 actuals and compared them to the worst year within that 10-year span, we might see a very significantly larger savings number. If we match it up against a year where it was very warm that winter, et cetera, we might see a smaller number. So again, it's against an average. In January of 2017, we were just deadlines and budget building with the budget committee. We needed to come up with a projection, an estimate of what our energy savings would be. Back to the models, back to the projections, back to the many, many experts who weighed in on the entire project. And we hoped that we would be able to save $138,000 per year. We would have gotten a lot closer to that except for some components that didn't get done, and I will touch on those. So, the last block on our piece of paper here, it's unrealized savings components. The unexpected and the unknown, demand charges, which is a technicality of the Eversource billing system. If you see a spike in usage, in electric usage for 15 minutes or longer, that's the rate for all day, even if it happens once a day. And we have had the Hollis Energy Committee invading the buildings with measuring devices, and that got plugged into all kinds of places all over the buildings, trying to figure out where these spikes are coming from. One was finally identified, one of the spike sources. For example, the huge water heater that serves Hughes was set to turn on with a manual timer. And Eric Reichert, who's the chair of the Energy Committee, does his hands like this in the air, and it was set for 8 o'clock, which is prime electric rates time. So he twisted it back to 7 o'clock or 6 o'clock, whatever prior time, and Bob's your uncle, the rate will, that particular component will drop.
Eliminates the spike.
The buildings are riddled with these kinds of anomalous, idiosyncratic spots that we are trying to still hunt down and fix. Rate differences, we've tried to project in 2016 and 2017 what the electric rates would be, what propane rates would be, what oil rates would be. We tried to be very, very conservative based on 5-year prior averages, et cetera, and it turned out things have gone a lot higher than we expected. So the rate differences have affected the savings. Unrealized solar value, production and metering. Again, the sun shines when it shines. It doesn't, it shines on the weekends when kids aren't here. The state no longer pays the net metering that it used to pay. The figure that we had when we first did the project has been cut by, I think, 80%. Of returns that we could get. So that's affected some of our savings. And that second gap that we found at Hughes was found after the construction was complete. It was found in January after the whole project was done. Is very significant. You open an outside door and air rushes in over a steel beam 100 feet long that's 7 degrees in January, right? It really affects the performance of the components that were put into place. Pieces of the project that were not put into place, that we did not do, that we planned to do, okay? We plan to replace.
So before you go
Yes.
on though.
Oh, the price,
but
sorry.
let's talk about what we
Yeah.
believe the impact of those
Yes,
unknowns were to our performance. And that is roughly, what we feel is around roughly $33,000 to $38,000 of added performance. So
Unrealized savings.
Yeah,
Right.
these unrealized savings, because it took resources out of the project because we had to, actually, no, that's the next thing you're going to
Yeah.
come up with.
Oh, I'd like
But
to
these
say
are
those.
other operational things that, particularly the demand charges, if we can get ahead of that.
Have been bedeviling
That's good,
us.
yeah. So we feel that there's some substantial upside there that can add to the performance. Now, you're just going to cover the not
Yeah.
completed items?
So the last section of this is the project's not completed. We had intended to replace all the lights in both buildings, hundreds and hundreds of lights. I think is it over 1,000 lights?
Yeah,
There's
it's
individual lamps.
Yeah.
There's a lot of them. And that has a very high quick payback and a very high impact on savings. And for a multitude of reasons, we weren't able to get that done as planned. I mentioned the 13 air source heat pumps that were planned for the second and third grade wing that didn't get done. Boiler consolidation, there was the intention, we have 2 boiler rooms in this building, and there's a whole technical thing about, consolidating them in order to reduce costs and improve performance and improve savings. And the Hughes building maintenance system optimization. So a machine that runs everything, it's a computer that keeps its fingers on all the different heating and electric. So at Hughes, we were not able to spend there was many thousands of dollars that would have been required to recommission this. That means starting the building from scratch, wiping the thing from scratch, and resetting everything so it's connected, including even that water heater that was set for the wrong time of day. For optimizing expenses. That didn't get done. There's a material that our consultants wanted to put above all these white tiles called phase change material. It has a very significant benefit for energy savings in certain heating situations. It's good at stopping sudden spikes in hot and sudden spikes in cold. What it doesn't have much impact on is the nice, smooth, consistent performance that air source heat pumps use. It had a cost component. We avoided that. We didn't do it. But it also had a savings component, and that was a significant one, and that
That was
it
part of our
figures here.
calculus.
It was
Yeah.
part of the calculus, exactly.
Okay.
I'm just going to say 2 more points. Why didn't these things get done? 1, costs escalated over this 3-year span, right?
Labor and materials.
Labor, not a political statement, tariffs changed, pricing changed, the labor market itself suddenly spiked. We found ourselves having a hard time hiring, so did our construction people, et cetera, and prices just went up. That was one component. The wrapping of this building turned out to be twice as much as we had planned. It turned out that the technical demands were much more significant than we had envisioned. That wasn't through any negligence on our part or any stupidity. It just, you open a can and the worms come out. It's a very old building.
It's part of learning, yeah.
And then another factor that's important is the roof at Hughes. We had multiple solar providers give us estimates and advice prior to going to the town with the warrant request for the lease purchase. None of them advised us to change the roofing at Hughes to tolerate to be able to take on the solar panels. But once we were getting quotes, once we were, had already got the funding, we had to replace a section of the Hughes roof to be able to take on the solar panels. It was the right thing to do, but it ate something like $90,000 extra that we had not planned to spend from this fund. So there were, not to make any excuses, but there were very real mechanical, technical contingencies that caused us to have to reprioritize.
Yeah.
And that's the
So now you know what's going to be presented in front of BudCom and the numbers and the story behind the things that were done, things that needed to be looked at, and things we're still learning about. Even
One
today.
thing I can categorically say, all the pieces we put into place are working very, very well. Would you not agree? The performance of the actual inputs has been excellent.
All right. Well, thanks, Tammy, for that. Is there any questions relating to the summary? Okay. Very good. I'd like to move on to the revenue and expense report for FY20.
The short version.
Yes.
Keep it moving.
So it's,
High gear here.
this is through September 25th, and which was about a few months ago. So this was done mostly for the first BudgetCom meeting, so that they had figures, so that you had the same data as them. We just didn't update since. However, since I've done this, there have been some new developments with SPED, so this end result of 145,321 is probably very optimistic, but the dust has still yet to settle with special education. So I'm hoping by December, if not January, we will have much better numbers. Any questions?
I have a question.
Mhm.
So I've heard that the current year budget is frozen. I don't know if that's a true statement. I guess if you could just explain what that means and how that impacts, things that we've budgeted for this year.
Yeah, what happens oftentimes around this time of year is we freeze budgets, and it's for a couple reasons in this case. One, we had a significant amount of unexpected special education costs. As that is going on, we're also developing budgets, and we're waiting for everything to get encumbered, which is what we work really hard at. So when we say we freeze the budget, that means that the principal just needs to have permission from Kelly to move forward with a purchase order. So it's not something that we haven't already encumbered. If it's already been encumbered, that's fine. And it's something that we do quite regularly, especially this time of year, because there are just so many moving pieces. We might have a student who's going to be placed out of district. We might have a student who just moved in who requires significant OT, PT, speech. A couple years ago, we had a unexpected new section, so we got permission to use the contingency fund. So, from a program standpoint, I would say probably around 80% of your supplies and all of that is already ordered in August, September, and well encumbered. This is more, maintenance issues, those type of things, and we just want to make sure that they align with the budget.
Great, thank you.
Any other questions? Okay, let's keep an eye on the reduce the funds to reduce taxes. Once we really firm that up, I really want to make that very public and clear, and particularly to BudCom, that money, if we don't spend it, it does go back.
Yep.
And when we have money to go back, we want to make sure they know it.
I know you had requested a
Yeah.
kind of a review of the past few years.
Yeah, I
and I'm
intend
still working on that.
I intend to cover that in the March meeting. Make sure people realize that we do give money back.
And the other thing that'll probably change also, just if we move forward with the bonds, it's our intent to decrease the maintenance trust amount. as well, because many of those items would be incorporated into the bond.
Interesting. Okay.
So it won't be, won't be significant, overwhelming, but all of a sudden, that'll impact that bottom line. FY,
Yeah, well, now we're talking about budget, Bill. Anything else for FY '20? We're moving on otherwise. Update on our budget building efforts for FY '21.
yeah, I just want to start with the SAU budget proposal. It's pretty much a level-funded budget, except that we're asking for one position, the facilities position.
Yep.
So the difference between last year and this year is a difference of $67,786, which turns to be a 3.9% increase, but that basically is at one facilities.
So that's a fully loaded FTE?
Correct.
Okay.
And that's where you see the difference between the operating budget and the default budget is the $67,786. So if they voted for a default budget, it's a bottom line budget, we wouldn't move forward with the facilities director. And we'd just move forward with the regular encumbered costs of the SAU. Now, why that's important is because this will be the first budget that's passed in December. It is passed by the SAU board, and then it's incorporated into the co-op board, the Hollis board, and the Brookline board.
You mean warrant?
So just
Warrant.
The warrant,
so just to make people aware who are maybe listening at home, that hearing in December is the time we can make changes to the number. After that hearing is set, that SAU budget is set, and it rides all the way to March when we put it up and tell everyone about it. So just letting folks know, if changes need to be made, it's done at that December meeting at the governing board level, which is posted and announced, and it's a hearing. So let people know, understand that.
As far as the Hollis School District's FY21 budget, we have just completed round 2.
Can
We
I
have a
just
4-round
comment
process.
on the prior?
Sure.
The facilities director, I remember, Rob, you had made what I thought was a really astute point at the governing board about the number and whether or not it could be taken into consideration, because I think that was a number that was brought forward then, too, the 66,000.
The SAU budget? Oh, you mean the FTE, the 68,995?
No, the facilities director.
Oh, the salary.
The salary,
Yes.
yes. And you had brought, up a point of maybe looking at that number to see if it was adequate to.
For a director level.
For a director level.
Yes.
Was that taken up in conversation, was that considered?
What we did, if you went to the last page of the SAU budget that was in your packet,
Okay.
and you went to the fund balance projection, what we have done is fund balance, we're projecting as of 7/1/2020 would be $160,821, and we would use 20,000 of that fund balance to offset the budget, and a portion of that 20,000 would be utilized if Rob's concern became realized.
Okay.
So we would have some money that
Correct.
we could use to adjust that.
Correct.
Excellent.
Yep.
Okay.
Great question, thank you.
Well, you knew I was going to ask about it again at the SAU meeting.
Oh, were you? Okay.
Oh, yeah.
I need to know now.
No, that's fine.
In terms
By all
of
means.
FY21, like I said, we've just done round 2. I think from an overall overview perspective, the single biggest items that are impacting us are special education. We're very fortunate in our community because that falls what I would call outside of guidance, meaning that those are funded because those are a priority for students, and the budget committee doesn't use that necessarily increase that were mandated by law to negatively impact what I'll call regular education. So it's a very complex process, but I think it ultimately ends up in the best interest of students. To that end, we start various rounds, and what we provide you is kind of the ongoing process so you can see what gets cut, because I asked the principals in round 1 to basically tell me everything and anything, and then we move along from there. So right now, under personnel, we're looking for a kindergarten para HPS. We have some shared positions that are listed there. I can tell you the priority is a shared SAU nurse. We really would like to see that, and that will be one of the areas where you probably will not see me cut. The other positions we may let go as we move through the rounds, because even though one budget may afford it, maybe Co-op or Brookline is looking at another priority. And we've had very good success moving things along. We have a library assistant slash a STEM person for the Hughes. Again, that is still in at round 2. Under round 2, you'll also see special ed personnel. This is our biggest pieces. As you know, we added the pre-K teacher for $82,628 that was not budgeted. We didn't expect to have a pre-K special intensive needs program, but as a result of move-ins, that had to materialize. So that has been, again, we have a bottom line budget, so we've moved things around to allow that position. We will be, I'm sorry?
So I see at HPS, just going back up to HPS, we're not pursuing the .8 environmental science to a full-time.
That's correct, because we're servicing all of our students right now at .8 at the primary school, and Hughes has a separate program they run in the spring. Okay.
So it's not going to impact our
No,
programmatically, or?
No, we're running the program right now. It's what we've been running. That's pretty much, Paula asked me for it, and I rejected. It's kind of like an ongoing game. I think she's hoping that some year the budget's in really good shape and she'll get a yes.
How's she doing with that?
Not good right now.
What is it that she's not, what?
It would provide her more scheduled flexibility. In terms of, we will be reducing 2 paraprofessionals, and that's simply because those children are moving to the middle school, and so they are assigned to specific children. We're moving OT from a half-time to a full-time, and we are we had done the majority of our speech services the last couple of years through contracted services, and we're going to be able to turn that into a position, because that position in the building will allow us much greater opportunities to service kids. That contracted services, even though it's the same dollar amount, we get an individual just for certain hours during the week. By moving it to a body, we'll have that individual between the 2 schools 5 days a week during the school day. And then we are also proposing RBT para. An RBT para is somebody who's been trained to gather data for certain individuals about their progress. We're taking an existing para and extending that person throughout the summer, because we now need RBT paras for our extended school year program. So that's why you see it's only an increase of 27,000, because again, it's only the number of days to get them to that. Moving to the next page, academics. We have HBS's share of the Envision Math program this year. We have a placeholder in both buildings for social studies. We're not sure that, we believe that cost is going to come down. It's social studies work. We still haven't received the state standards yet. They haven't been approved. So we'll be looking at that number. And then we also are having a discussion around RTI summer programs, similar to the model we run at HPS for Hughes. We're not sure we would have enough subscribers, so we're in discussions about would that actually be able to happen. Be nice to offer it, but I'm not sure from past history if families will want to have their child in school on the summer, because it's not like extended school year where it's kind of a requirement for that child. So we're having academic discussions around that, so it may or may not move forward based on our discussions. But if it doesn't get in, we don't want to add something around 3 and 4 unless it's absolutely necessary. Under new computer equipment, we're looking for Chromebooks at the 3rd grade, and replacing 60 Chromebooks up at Hughes, and the appropriate charging stations to go with those.
Andy,
Could
can I
you?
interrupt?
Go ahead. Maybe it's the same thing.
Last year, we wanted Chromebooks and had to cut some of them, I think.
Yep, we did.
So is this coming, this is,
Yes, and it's also going to come up kind of again as we get into what I'll call the Windows 10 issue, which is on the
Yeah, I was
budget.
just gonna say, do they run Windows 10?
Right.
Could you talk about the box too?
The box is actually a program that we took out of the budget, but Gina is going to use Title IV, which is
Okay.
for technology, which is a federal grant program. So they will have box funded at both schools, I believe it is, and Gina's working with Nicole on that.
So it'll no longer be a cost to students to participate, or, because currently when they run it, there's a,
Yeah, it's, they're going to use Title IV funds to defer some of that cost.
defer some of
So
the
there'll still
cost.
be a cost.
Okay, the cost
But the
will
hope is to reduce the cost, but also offer some additional scholarships to students who can't
Oh,
afford it.
What is Box, please?
It's Build Our Kids' Strengths, and essentially it's a research-based program on a book called Spark that talks about increased outcomes for students when they're engaged in physical activity. So for
read that book.
before school.
it's an awesome book.
It's
if you have
before
interest.
school exercise.
So it's a
Yeah.
before-school program,
days a
and the
week.
idea is to just increase their heart rate. Is incredible.
Blew my mind, yeah.
And we have our own internal data to suggest that it's a program that is very successful for our students, and the ability to expand this program, I think, is in our best interest.
That's awesome.
Under replacement computers, we have a regular replacement cycle for staff laptops and projectors, and that's what you see there under both schools. The big piece, or what I'll call the new expense, that really is a result of HB 1612, which is new security, data security, and that. Basically, the machines are going to have to run Windows 10, or they are not going to meet the security requirements. The elementary schools, again, because of what they're typically doing, have older equipment. So we're looking at a significant hit. This is one area we're asking for relief from guidance, because again, this came about as a result of the law. It's about $95,000 at Hughes, and about $29,000 at the primary school. We have a long way to go through the budget. We're still talking about, laptops, desk books, Chromebooks. What's the best mechanism for replacing these? What do we want to use in the labs? So those costs might come down, but historically, it's always easier for people to accept a cost coming down than a cost going up.
Gotta love the unfunded mandate.
There was no cost to HB 1612. Just point.
Well, that's
We
how
just
they
keep
sold it,
saying
right?
it. in one word.
Yeah.
Put your heels
Oh, except for
together.
the 95,000.
The next items, we have money in there to upgrade our Barracuda firewall, which Rich takes care of. We have a portion of a fingerprinting machine. You can imagine how many fingerprints we do with the Holllis Police Department. They purchased the actual machine. It's going to be a new laser machine, so no more ink and roll your fingers. And it'll also make it less likely that the material comes back to me to be redone by a parent or a teacher, because it just doesn't get read well. So what we're contributing to is the annual maintenance cost, because we are by far, as a SAU, the largest users of fingerprints. But obviously, it's something that I totally support paying for, because, again, it's child safety. And $450 per school, when you think of the number of people that we're fingerprinting, it's a bargain. The next is safety issues. We have phase 1 of 2 phases at HPS, and then we have cameras at Hughes that completes their project upgrade around their security cameras and their fobs. Under building needs at HPS, they're looking at an audio meter for the health office, which I believe is to test all our students' hearing, and we're looking to upgrade a couple of our water bubblers. Against the Hughes, we have classroom fan replacements. We have a new basketball pole, and as much as I like basketball, I don't know if that's going to make it to round 3. And again, water bubblers and filling stations.
So
Is that the outdoor one?
Yes.
The outdoor one that's broken?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Do it, please.
So the other piece is, we will be looking at our maintenance issues and looking to reduce those in kind of looking at the bond, because we really have all our priority issues in the bond. So many of these, some of the smaller ones we'll have to do, but a lot of them can be postponed. The difficult news right now is that if it stayed exactly as it is today, you'd be looking at a 7.8% increase. Now, a significant amount of that increase is going to stay in the budget anyways because it's related to special education, and that is outside of guidance, so that gets funded. The other piece, the guidance number that the Budget Committee is providing is probably, it was originally 2%, it's probably be closer to 1% when we take out the fact that we've already passed teachers' contracts, so that increase is already represented in our number. And Kelly and I have been doing this will be year 6 of doing this. We're quite confident we'll get there, but not everything you see will make it. But what we do is from year to year, we keep all of these documents, and if it's a second or third time, it has a better chance of making it through than the first time.
Squeaky wheel.
All right, we'll
Yep.
let you do it this time.
Yeah. In some ways, we won't have a lot of choices, because one of the things is, when I look at the overall piece, SAU is going up slightly, basically for one position. The co-op budget right now, working with them, is in good shape because they're seeing a significant decrease in special ed because of students aging out of the school district. And then Brookline will probably be a negative because they have a bond coming off. So I'm always trying to balance the global piece of this as well.
Spread the pain.
Spread the pain.
So
yeah.
we're sitting after round 2 at 14, just north of 14 million.
Mhm.
$14,287,249.
And that doesn't include the passage of the bond, obviously,
Right.
because that hasn't even been approved. Yeah. And we will make progress on that, but I just wanted to give the people the lay of the land.
Okay.
And then,
Any other items relating to the budget building efforts?
no, it goes well. I want to, as always, publicly thank Budget Committee. It's not an easy process, but I think the use of the guidance formula has benefited all students every year. There occasionally are some surprises in special ed that do force us to make some adjustments to the budget. But I think overall, the way the calculation is done has really served our
Yeah.
kids well.
I think so, and I think the fact that we've been doing and providing guidance, or they've been providing guidance since like as early as October,
Yeah.
that helps for a much more extended conversation and allows us more time to hit targets.
Right.
And if we need relief, we ask for relief. I remember there was a time where you didn't get guidance. You just brought a budget and hoped they would agree with it or not. And it was a very protracted process.
Right.
Now it's much more,
Right.
Evidence-based, really.
evidence and data-based, and it's a conversation. It is not trying to sell a number to somebody who wasn't involved even making it.
Right. No, and I think the other piece that's really helped is the procedures and way we go about developing it to the business office within multiple rounds. The school board gets it, the budget committee gets it. We may not always agree on a cut, but we all understand why it has to be made. And I think that has gone very well, and I think that will continue through this budget cycle.
Yeah. So I just want to put it out there, we did already touch upon the lease agreement discussion. Could we dispense with that and
We
move into
can, and we can go right
deliberations?
into deliberations, and
I'm sure we'll hear more about some kind of lease guidance at some point. So why don't we get into to see what actions the board will take regarding the policy memos submitted by the policy committee.
I make a motion to accept the third reading and adopt policy JCA, change of school or assignment.
Second.
Any discussion?
There have been no changes to this policy since the last reading.
Okay. Seeing no other discussion elements, all in favor? All right. 5-0-0.
I motion to accept the third reading and adopt policy JEC, manifest educational hardship.
Second.
Discussion.
No changes to this from the previous version as well.
Okay. Any questions, comments? Seeing none, all in favor? 5-0-0.
Motion to accept the third reading and adopt policy EHB, data records retention.
Second.
Discussion?
There have also been no changes to this policy.
Okay, all in favor? 500.
Motion to accept the third reading and adopt policy GADA, employment references and verification, prohibiting, aiding, and abetting of sexual abuse.
Second.
Discussion?
We made a very minor grammatical change to this one.
Yeah, remember last time, right?
Right, yeah.
There's a note from our recording secretary suggesting that, I'm sorry, you know what, this relates to the next thing, I'm sorry, I'm jumping ahead, I beg your pardon.
We'll get there.
So does the motion need to say as amended, or no?
What's the outline say?
Well, the outline doesn't say.
It doesn't say.
But it,
I mean,
Was it amended since we
well,
read
it
that?
was just moving this, in addition, this prohibition does not apply if at least one of the following conditions applies, was just basically on two different lines. So we just moved it up.
You just removed an incorrect spacing.
still
It's
an
a formatting
amendment.
thing.
It was formatting.
No, it's a formatting thing, not a
Okay,
language.
formatting, so we didn't
Yeah,
change
we'll
It's
leave it.
formatting.
language?
No,
Oh,
we didn't
then-
change language. It was a
Right.
formatting
Because
change.
how it's formatted in our page isn't what's on
Yes.
the
Yeah.
website.
Okay.
All right, no, we don't need to do that.
All right,
Okay.
good.
Okay, all in favor? 500. Good to be.
I'm seeing the note that our recording secretary
Right.
made.
Okay.
Or she just simply suggests that we might decide to waive third readings on some of these.
Okay,
Just
but
because
this
we're not- we don't
next one
think-
is a first reading though.
Right.
Okay,
What, JEB?
yes.
Says, given its
Says
second.
second
Oh,
reading.
sorry, it is second reading.
Right,
I
we're in second
apologize.
reading.
All right.
So,
So just make the motion a second, and we can discuss whether we want.
okay,
Yeah.
got it. Sorry, motion to accept the second reading, waive the third, and adopt policy JEB, age of entrance.
Second.
Discussion.
So the change that we made to this was based on comments from our last meeting, was just to add a reference to our residency policy, which is JFAA, and that's what you see underlined.
Yes.
So if that was the only change, then I would like to amend the motion to read, accept the second reading, waive the third, and adopt JEB, age of entrance.
That is the motion that I made.
That's the
No,
motion
you
that she,
didn't. Did
yes,
you
I
say
heard
that?
her.
Yes, I did.
No, she's already
Oh
making
my
the motion.
God, I tuned you out, I'm so sorry.
Aren't we also discussing the residency one, though? Should we be waiving a third reading if
It only
it's
references.
They only
it
reference each other,
references-
it's just a
Doesn't matter.
cross-reference.
Yeah, we can change the other one and still reference it when it's changed.
It's a
Can we
title,
not?
it's not the language of it.
I
Just
think
a
we,
pointer.
yeah, I think we'll just take them one at a time. I think we can move forward with this one
Yes.
and then consider the other
Yeah, I
one
don't see
separately.
any problem with that.
Okay.
Yeah, I know what you're saying, yes.
Where are
Did
we?
we
got a
vote?
I
live-
mean,
we got a
you know,
li- we got a
Brooke would be
live
right
motion.
Do we
if that
really want to waive the
materially
third
changed.
reading? Is it
Well, we don't- we-
saving
This is
anything right
age
now?
of
Well,
entrance.
it
If it does, if we are
it
gonna
does,
touch on
because then we're gonna
anything
go
else.
through this same thing next time to do the third reading. If we know we're not gonna make any other changes to it.
This is
I mean, we
age
do,
of
we
entrance,
do
not
do it.
residence.
What we don't do is
Right.
do it on the first reading, because we really, it's just philosophically, we wanna leave it open for a month so people can come and tell us if there's an issue. But we're already in second reading, and it's a pretty solid.
I suppose my point was that if there's a reference to another policy, thank you, that we're going to be talking about, might something come up in that?
Yeah,
And
that
that
would
we
material
waived the
effect.
third reading, and then we're like, oh, well, maybe we should have, just supposing
It's a
that.
perfectly good point, and it does,
No, I'm just trying to think, because it's really just a reference, but I don't care either way. I mean, if you feel strongly, we could,
I don't, I'm just
You-
putting
just-
that out there.
You can always bring back a policy. So
Sure.
even if
Open 'em
you
up anytime.
did something
All right.
tonight,
We've
you could
probably
bring it back
talked more
next
about
month.
it now than we would have just not waiving it and.
we get to open
and
up
did the third
policies,
reading.
just whenever.
Like a
we
box
want.
of cookies, all right,
Yeah.
great.
Okay.
box of puppies.
Okay.
We have a
No,
motion on the
cookies,
floor.
I'm not
We have a
opening
live
boxes of
motion, so
puppies.
I would really like to call the vote.
Okay.
So, all in favor? 500. Moving on.
These cookies, they're
Okay.
both delightful.
Motion to accept the second reading, waive the third, and adopt policy JLCB, immunization of students.
Second.
Discussion.
There were no changes to this since the previous version.
Seeing no other conversation, all in favor? 500.
Okay. Motion to accept the second reading, waive the third, and adopt policy JLCC, head lice, pediculosis.
Second.
That's good.
Close enough.
Where's wait on it?
The only change we made here was we just deleted references to non-applicable RSAs in that first sentence.
Okay.
Which we had removed from the legal reference in the previous
Sure.
version, but we just didn't, we hadn't caught them that they were in the first
Any
sentence.
other comments? Seeing none, all in favor? 500.
Okay.
Now we got some first readings.
Here we go, okay. Motion to accept the first reading of policy EEA, student transportation services, as presented.
Good discussion.
So the change here is under letter C. We just added that the bus stop shall be established under the direction of the superintendent. We added in collaboration with the transportation company and based on pupil enrollment. That's the only change that we've made to that policy.
And the
D was
deletion of the following.
Right, and the deletion of the following sentence, correct.
And D, oh, I think
Yeah,
you're
was
just gonna
D
say.
added?
D
Because D
added?
was underlined.
D was, it was given its own separate spacing. It was part of paragraph C, but we felt it kind of got lost, and so we made it its own separate letter. Thank you. You're catching these.
Any
things.
other comments,
Yeah.
concerns? Seeing none, all in favor?
This is accepting the first
500.
reading.
First
Yeah.
reading
Yep.
only.
So
Yep.
it's open now.
Okay, motion to accept the first reading of policy JFAA, admission for resident students as presented.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Okay, discussion.
So the change here was to again cross-reference age of entrance policy, which we discussed previously, and we just changed some of the language in the first sentence.
Okay.
I will take the comment that we heard during public input back to our policy committee, and we'll discuss that at our next meeting.
Okay, sounds
So
good.
I also had a concern about that all new resident students accompanied the parent guard should register at school before opening day and as early as possible. I felt that was a little bit awkward. I'm wondering if I just don't think, I don't know, before opening day and as early as possible. It implies that you want them to show up at 6 in the morning, so.
And as far in advance of school year start or
I
something.
think the point is that if you're not here on opening day, if you move in later, please,
As
it
soon
needs
as
to be
possible,
prompt. I
yeah.
think it just needs to be worded.
Okay, okay. we can
And
look
then
at that.
also I wondered, although it's not a policy matter, in the discussions that we had with a member of the public a couple of meetings ago, the topic of a procedure that was required of parents for certain processes was only found in the student handbook. So I'm wondering if we could mention the student handbook in some fashion in this policy, the student manual. Because some of the things, there are just references in there that are valuable. Do you think there's any?
I think sending it back to policy and then they can
Yep.
make a
Yeah.
decision on that.
Yep.
So this also governs the proof of residency as well?
Mhm.
So
Yep.
some of the things on my mind are, do we have procedures, or do we need to consider a procedure document underneath this policy that talks about periodicity, categories of who we're asking to residency? I'm just thinking about the practice itself. And do we need something that governs what that is, or provide additional guidance to our administrators on how we want to carry that out? So just something for you guys to think about. Yeah.
Kind of piggybacking on that, proof of residency satisfactory to the superintendent is crazy unclear, so I
Yeah.
don't know if what you're talking about would address that. where it's saying here are the categories of
Yeah,
what you
I
can
would say
present,
if there's
and it
something,
should be-
yeah.
And it should be, you can say it's,
If
here's
there's
where to find it.
If there's
Or even
something
if it's
that's too
small enough,
vague,
here
let's
here are the
sharpen
5
it.
things that you need.
Yeah, let's sharpen it. Let's
5 ways
take
to prove it,
the,
put it right in.
yeah, with
We
its
can
big
absolutely do
areas, and if there's, I'm just thinking about how we carry these things out. Might there be a need for a procedure for this particular? I
A
don't
lot of our
know.
policies have list examples that aren't exclusive. So for example, this, but would qualify, and for example, this would not qualify. That could be an illustration at least to help people.
So
Okay,
we'll look
you're here, superintendent. What would you consider satisfactory proof of residency?
A lease, electric bills, cable bills, things of that nature so that we can prove. I mean, I wish we didn't need it, but I can tell you it happens more often than you would anticipate. And it's, potentially, in the case of a regular ed child, that could be a $15,000 case of fraud. In the case of a special ed child, that could be a $100,000 case of fraud. So I know that we get it from both sides, the taxpayers who are very concerned. I can't tell you how many anonymous emails I get that Johnny got on the bus out in front of my house and his mother dropped him there. Now, I do my due diligence, and it turned out Johnny missed the bus in front of his house. That was the closest house to get back on the same bus.
Right.
But, I mean, so people are very, very active in watching this because it's their tax dollars. So I absolutely respect what was said during public input, and I think we need to figure out how we do that and do it in an appropriate manner. But I think the policy committee coming back to us will be able to make that happen.
Yeah, I think it's important that we reserve the right to be able to validate and to make sure that, folks who are sending their kids here are residents. But it's all about how we do it,
Right.
in what period we do it, and, there's a lot just to practice, in practice that we have to kind of
Could you
consider.
give
when
an
you-
example of a document that won't work? That somebody might have said, this is my so-and-so? Like a bank
Well, you just
statement,
had
would
one
that?
Yeah, I had one recently where the property owner had essentially written a letter saying that this person was residing there. It wasn't a lease, it wasn't an official legal document, so we had reached out to the family, asked for additional documentation.
Okay.
And I think that when you search the policies right now, this is the only policy that does refer to residency and proofs of residency, and it speaks only about proof of residency, initial proof of residency. And I think what came up in discussion with some residents that are a particular renters. There's a procedure right now to require proof of residency on a yearly basis of all renters in order to mitigate fraud. And whether or not that is a discriminatory practice is
So would you
Whether or
say,
I'm trying to picture.
like,
how it's
expand that to
discriminatory.
everybody?
How it's discriminatory. I'd like to understand better how it's discriminatory, or in what
because
examples you can picture. 'Cause I'm not picturing it.
well, because the burden of proof is put on the renters, whereas if you are a homeowner, the SAU is able to more easily verify
I see.
your residency, so that it's not asked of homeowners, it's only asked of renters.
Ah, I see.
Do you check homeownership records on a regular basis?
We
For that
we
purpose?
check if we're given reason to check, and I'm just from the standpoint of, because the tax bills are going out to those residences, it's much easier to confirm. But if you're moving into a community and you're building a home, we ask you for all sorts of documentation before the kids are enrolled. But I think it's something that, we could benefit from looking at what we're doing and finding out if we can do that in a better way. So I think all the comments are highly appropriate. And at least I think if we put them into a policy and they're listed there, and then it doesn't make me feel like I'm being singled out. It's more, this is what we ask for anybody, and then we'll be consistent of what we do.
And that's the great thing about
Yeah.
having a policy committee, because they can do the heavy lifting. Thanks, Amy.
We could just chat about it. and
Right.
make
So
Amy
we
work
can,
it
we
out.
can talk about the high level, and then they get to figure out all the specifics, and then come
Thank
back
you, Amy.
and tell us and share what you got.
Thanks for the detail, Andy. And
All right, we need to keep moving here.
I think we have to vote on that one.
Yes, we do.
Yeah.
So all in favor of the motion?
accepting first reading
Yes.
with
5-0.
homework.
Yes. I think that's all we have from a policy standpoint. So I want to move on to see what actions the board will take regarding moving forward with a proposal for the school and SAU building renovations.
I move to move forward with the proposal for the SAU and school building renovations.
Second.
Okay, discussion.
What does that, tell me what move forward means.
Well, what I'm looking for is that the board supports that they're going to ultimately do something. We don't know the exact dollar amount yet. I'm just being honest, because the piece is, right now, we know that we have a cost of $3.8 million approximately. I don't see it increasing over that, but I think Budget Committee needs to know that the school board is at that number. It may come down, but they do intend to, whether it's one article or two articles, there's still a lot of steps. But it was just, Tom had really asked, before they got into deep dive, is it something that the school board is going to support? So I'm just looking that we have a consensus of support.
I would add this. We were presented numbers, we were presented breakdowns of the project and possible approaches. It's not my sense that we have any objections of how we're proceeding. So this motion would be to say, as presented, we're pursuing this. Numbers might change. Some things inside the project might change a little bit. We might change who knows? But we're pursuing this, and we're pursuing a number like the 3.8 and to be bonded. So they know that we're not just having chit chat about it.
And that
We're pursuing it.
We're not in disagreement with the administration.
Right. No basic issues relating to the project.
Correct.
Any other discussions? Seeing none. All in favor? 5-0-0. To see what action the board will take regarding the facility security grant award.
That's the one we'll give.
So we did table that. So I got halfway through it and said, oh, that's the one we tabled. So we will be adding that to our agenda next time. We'll have another opportunity to receive additional input. And then we'll go from there. So we don't need the non-public?
Nope.
So mercifully, I will take a motion to adjourn.
I motion to adjourn. I move to adjourn. I make a motion. This is what's happening right now. I make a motion to adjourn.
To adjourn. All right, undebatable motion. All in favor? 5-0-0. Thank you, everybody. We got done a lot of work tonight.